So hello and welcome to the latest webinar in the Elemental Talks programme for 2022. Our topic today, from waste to resource, sustainable and efficient wastewater heat recovery innovations in new developments. In our session sponsored by Myra Showers. Your chair for the next 60 minutes, my name is Jim McClelland, founder and editor SustMeme, home to both the magazine and the top 500 rankings. Joining me on the panel this sunny morning are Sarah Castelvecchi, Water Saving Manager, Anglian Water Services, Tim Pollard, Principal Pollard and Pollard, and Alex Hislop, Marketing Manager, Product and Service at Myra Showers. It is all live, as you will see, with a Q&A to finish, so you can pop your questions in the appropriately named Ask a Question box, probably in the middle, the bottom of your screen. You type them in there, you pose them, I'll ask them, they'll answer them. So this webinar forms part of a program of talks hosted and produced by Elemental, elementalexpo.com. I'll give you a quick bit of background for those who aren't familiar. It's the online community for professionals focused on innovation in heat, water, air and energy, the vital elements within the built environment now and in the future. You'll find a full diary of events on the website, range of upcoming webinars. You can also view the back catalogue, whole host of topics. It's all available on demand, as this will be almost a second after we've finished today. Who's who of great speakers, and I should point out everything is free to access, so you can reshare widely. Plus, this year, the physical, real-world, in-person Elemental Expo will take place at the NEC Birmingham, 21 to 23 June 2022. So, see you there. Right, very brief intro from me for the topic, because we've got a lot to cover. Wastewater heat recovery. So, wastewater heat recovery is becoming a hot topic, pun intended. We've seen pioneering work in Sweden, pilot trials in Scotland, plus recently launch of a new global portal called wastewaterheat.online, which has already uploaded heat maps for cities like Christchurch in New Zealand. Much of this activity, however, is concerned with heat from sewage pipes and projects maybe at the scale of district heating. What we're talking about today is domestic wastewater in respect to bathrooms and showers. So, issues table for discussion might include the following questions. How are water-related sustainability measures impacting developments of new homes? How can adopting circular economy principles help house builders respond to requirements of the upcoming SAP changes by 2025? And what are the pioneering technology innovations in wastewater and heat recovery systems? And how can they help us hit those green targets? I've got a couple of notes on SAP guidance updates. Hopefully my info is correct here. The government says it's committed to increasing the accuracy of SAP. So, most recent version, SAP 10.2, published last month, December, comes into force with the updated Part L building regs this summer. For existing buildings, the simplified version of SAP called Reduced Data SAP, RDSAP, is used, also to be updated this spring. And the next big iteration, almost like the new Apple operating system, SAP RDSAP 11, come into force in 2025 alongside the much vaunted future home standard. So there's a little bit perspective on where we're up to with the regs. Right, enough from me. Let the debate begin. So we're going to start exploring opportunities offered in new homes and retrofit markets by sustainable resource use and efficient wastewater heat recovery, plus some of the challenges. I'd like to begin by asking our panelists to introduce themselves, obviously, but explain their perspective a little and share some opening insights. So it's a who are you, where do you fit into the puzzle, where do you think UK house building is right now in terms of sustainable resource use in general, plus, of course, water and heat recovery in particular. So first up, perspective on efficiency from the largest water and sewerage company in England and Wales geographically. Sarah, your opening thoughts, please.
Thank you. Yes. I'm Sarah Castelvecchi, Water Saving Manager at Anglian Water. I've been working at Anglian for the last 10 years now and started off my career within our water resources team. So you may be familiar with our water resources management plan. It's a 25-year investment strategy that all water companies have a statutory duty to do. So I'm here really to kind of broaden the debate a little bit in terms of water demand and looking at it from the perspective of not only in terms of trying to reduce carbon emissions from the water industry and how the households can make an impact, but also looking at water demand as a usage and how it impacts on our environment in ways that we can make new builds more efficient. So I know that in the new build sector that there is ongoing debates around kind of how do you make new builds more efficient. So actually the biggest thing for us as well is not just looking at technology, but it's also driving behavior change, because that's one of the key drivers for reducing efficiencies, water and energy, and obviously they're both interlinked very much as well. So for me, I'm not an expert in heat recovery, but for me it's about trying to broaden that perspective around water use in general at efficiency level.
Excellent, great, and thank you very much for joining us today. So we have 25-year investment strategy. That's a bit about context of water demand, usage, including, of course, carbon emissions, environmental impact, and of course a nod for beyond tech. There is the behaviour change piece. Of course, it's and behaviour change. It's not either or. The two, as we've often found with a lot of studies, go very strongly hand in hand. So coming now to you, Tim, for opening thoughts, as a sustainability guru, no less, joining the dots between energy, water and waste. What's your perspective, Tim?
Okay, well, firstly, my name's Tim Pollard, and I'm the principal of my own consultancy company, Pollard & Pollard, and I've spent the last 20 years working in the area of sustainability and construction. I think where we are at the moment is we're on the kind of watershed of a revolution, if you like. I think particularly it's a shame, of course, that it's taken this long. We did get there before. We nearly had a code for sustainable homes, which all fell apart at the last moment. But as of now, of course, we know, according to the government, that all new homes need to be ready for net zero by 2025, and that they apparently will be building 300,000 homes per annum. And also, and I think, really crucially, the fact that existing buildings, wherever possible and practical, will be required to meet an EPC standard. Now, both those things are going to require really, really, really hard work to both be efficient and to recover all of the stuff that's wasted, and that includes space heating, which is escaping through gaps in the walls and under the doors, etc., through the walls, but also water. So I think it'll become a must-do, and I would also just like to stress that I agree very much with the behaviour element. We have to address the single most complex component in any building, and that's the people living in it, because we can fit all the fantastic devices we want, but if people don't want to use them properly or live in a wasteful way, then frankly, we ain't going to make those gains. So I think a really exciting time ahead, and I think the subject could become under the microscope.
Excellent, good stuff. Positive noises from you there, Tim. So words like watershed, revolution, exciting times, potentially, of course. Net zero 2025, 300,000 homes. These are big numbers, or small numbers in the case of net zero, of course. An existing stock, of course, and a lot of hard work ahead. There's no getting away from that. But it is a must-do, as you say, and the whole picture of heat loss full stop. There's a lot of concentration on generating more energy in clean and green fashion, but we're suffering a lot of heat loss. So, there are huge efficiency gains, although that's not as perhaps as sexy and glamorous as some of the generation tech, which people are more keen to talk about in some cases. So, Alex, from the point of view of a leading showering brand within the UK market, your opening thoughts, please, on the topic.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, and nice to be here and glad to meet you all. So I guess initially a little bit about me. I'm marketing manager for product and services at Myra Showers. I think like many people in the marketing industry, I'm a bit of an accidental marketeer. I actually did a degree in environmental science and came into sort of business and product design really because that seems to be the biggest area where you can make an impact from a sustainability perspective. And working for Myra for the last few years, I think that's certainly something that's at the forefront of the Myra brand's mind at all times. Been around, actually, business was 100 years old last year and has always brought innovation to market, whether it be the first thermostatic mixing valve, electric showers, and recently bringing a wastewater heat recovery product to market in heat capture, which is why we're here today, really. We have skin in the game, so to speak, in terms of talking about this technology. But yes, certainly is hearing from Tim there talking about the challenges we have ahead to meet the future home standard are really significant. I think there are really big changes that developers will need to make in designing new homes from 2025 onwards. I think one of the things that we've certainly experienced as a brand who are currently working with those customers is that actually the market is being really proactive. I think generally most developers recognize that there is big changes required, and there really is a significant amount of upskilling in terms of understanding the technology that's available, with installers themselves understanding what can be installed. And when you think about the significance of a change, for example, to say we're moving away from gas boilers, that is really quite large. But what we're experiencing is that developers generally are wanting to be collaborative. They're wanting to work with industry, wanting to understand what are the products that are coming through that can help them and actually drive us as well to bring those products to market. So in that sense, it is a really interesting period now as we sort of collaborate around those solutions. And I think certainly wastewater heat recovery will have a significant part to play. I mean, the evidence as you look in SAP is that, for the sort of cost of the product and the system and the install, it delivers the most significant benefit for SAP scores than any other technology which you can add to a home. And I wonder at this point whether it's helpful just to explain a little bit what wastewater heat recovery is and how it works. Because as you said, Jim, there are systems in place that are sort of much larger scale, but in terms of how it works in a home, it's effectively a device that looks a little bit like a piece of pipe that fits in the infrastructure of a home around the soil pipe. And as hot water escapes down the drain, whether it be through a shower or bath, it effectively runs incoming water from the cold mains around that pipe to bring it up to a higher temperature before taking that water through to the boiler or whatever heating system in the house. So the heating system effectively doesn't have to work as hard to bring that water up to temperature to then put it back in to the hot water feed. And that is really efficient. The product that we've brought to market in heat capture is 65% efficient. It can have a significant impact in terms of the amount of energy used in a home and can obviously save the people who live in that home money on their energy bills as well. So, we really do think this is going to be a fundamental technology for the future of home design.
Excellent. Thank you. Some real energy efficiency and cost saving win-wins there. A sort of belated happy birthday to Myra, I guess, but 100, but I'm glad to hear with heat capture, skin in the game, innovating in a dynamic fashion right up to the current day and ongoing. Challenges ahead, as you said, big changes in prospect. I think maybe culturally we're sort of beginning to feel the momentum because petrol cars are going to be gone, gas boilers are going to be gone. Maybe we're beginning to understand that there are big changes in many parts of especially the energy picture. But of course, 2025 is not far away. It's 2022 now, in case we hadn't noticed, but good to hear the market's being proactive. So great, those opening comments. Now this middle section is called challenges and conflicts. So you can guess how we're going to go. So it is difficult. It is not straightforward. So I'm going to zoom in on specifics. I'd like to challenge the panel as to why the rollout of resource-efficient innovation is still so slow, especially in the new build market, residential. So what's the problem? Cost, culture, policy, demand, market forces. I'll be asking what needs to happen for these solutions to start appearing in specs, on site, at a speed and scale necessary to help us make that journey towards net zero. So Tim, I'm coming to you first. In a nice way, as you suggested, I know, seen it all before. Eco products, processes, projects, policy, I guess even. And yet here we are, 2022, we're still talking about energy, heat, waste, water efficiency, almost as if these were new concepts for some people. So my provocation to you is, look at the house building sector and the property market. Why should we actually expect the sustainability story to be any different this decade?
Sadly, Jim, I'm rather cynical about it being so, unless it's forced upon them. And that's always been my opinion. I think the most effective change is change which is supported with regulation, frankly. If you think house builders will do anything other than opt for the cheapest possible option, then you're being a little unwise. And unfortunately, it's not seen as a selling point. And I think that's a shame as well, because there's been lots of efforts in the past to try and show how an EPC, for example, might affect the cost of a property and how you might expect more for a property which has a higher rating. Whilst I agree with you, Jim, about the fact that it's becoming much more visible, I think, to the entire population, there's still an awful long way to go, a tremendously long way to go. And I think if you were to ask a lot of people in the street, Joe Public or Joanne Public, of course, then they would say they'd like a blue one or a green one or one which is powerful or one which is wet or whatever. I think very few of them would say one which is really efficient in terms of energy or water use itself. So I think there's a huge education role out there. And I also think that installers, plumbers, will be absolutely crucial in leading that role. And they have to be offered a similar amount of support in terms of skills, training, competencies, to support that, because I think they'll be one of the major routes in terms of communicating these aspects. And the last thing I'd like to say is about design. For many years, we've banged in boilers and nailed them to the wall, and then a chap very candidly yesterday when I was talking to him said when he started putting boilers in, he reckoned that the radiator should be about the same size as the window. And I think that's as far as we've got in terms of design. So I think it's a really crucial role in understanding not only the design of heating systems, but the design of plumbing systems to make sure that we're making them, number one, efficient in terms of water use, and number two, efficient in terms of energy recovery. So I don't know if that's shocking to some people, but frankly, I think it's the truth. It's what happens in the world today.
Excellent. I appreciate your candor about that. It's very much a glass half full, half empty scenario. Call for regulation. Of course, regulation typically is slow. It's seldom ahead of the game. It's very necessary, but it's seldom leading the charge. So we need pioneers and early adopters. Good points about the education and communication piece. You know, to some degree, we're looking to turn that eco-anxiety that's meant to be experienced by many of the Blue Planet generation, turn it into things they can do, especially in the home, which is one of the biggest ticket items they buy and spend money on and maintain. But of course, skills and design as well. The industry has a lot of work to do to resource some of this effort in terms of people and abilities. So some good challenging issues out there. So now, Alex, if I come to you, and it's kind of picking up a little bit of what we've just been saying there with Tim. So hot water demand being added to SAP regs for 2025. It's claimed your Myra heat capture helps specifiers and new property developers go green and get ready for new standards. Great, and it will. But, and this is my challenge to you, house building is infamous for taking the easiest, cheapest route to completion. So my question is, how can you actually hope to penetrate such a conservative market, Alex?
I think, like Tim says, it is absolutely a regulation-driven market, and when we see that with our customers at the moment, there's a lot of sort of gearing up for the change, but not necessarily a lot of people jumping off the cliff now, as it were, to kind of get ahead of the change. I think what we have seen from developers is that with the Future Home Standard really mapping out the changes that we need to make over a long period of time. Certainly, several of them have committed to trying to get to net zero before 2050 because they know it's coming. There is an incentive to really understand the technology and the changes that they need to make ahead of that time. But inevitably, some of those changes may add cost. And I think, there is a question mark to ask around with the government to understand what they can do to incentivize the developers to make change rather than waiting for the last minute before they potentially have to add cost into their properties. But I think, cost control is important. What we don't want to do is create an environment where, yes, the regulation is now there, but now properties are becoming much more expensive and therefore we're not building as many and they're not as affordable. But I think one of the challenges that we're certainly taking on board as a manufacturer and a designer is, to try to give people both. I mean, a wastewater heat recovery system is not that expensive. It's certainly not expensive when you compare it to something like, solar PV. In fact, if you install a wastewater heat recovery system in a sort of average 3-bed new build property, rather than having under the sort of new 2025 future home standard, you would typically have to have about 8 solar PV panels on the roof, and you can take 3 of those off. So you're actually controlling a lot of cost by having some of those innovations in place. I think one of the other things, as Tim alluded to as well, is energy prices. I think the cost of people heating their homes now is getting to the point where, I genuinely think it may start to incentivize people to really think about energy efficiency in a way that perhaps they didn't before. It's such a significant cost of living now that actually making those investments, you can see that they pay back. Again, a wastewater heat recovery system pays back within 5 years. So, typically something else, if it was going to take 20 years, where's the incentive for people to actually do that? And I think the final point I think I would make is about really that driver for innovation. We say this is a regulatory driven market, but it's also a regulated market, and that can stifle some innovation. So, the ability for developers to really consider very innovative solutions around how they might meet these requirements can be constrained. So, for example, if you look at something like a recirculating shower, there are several regulations around how we use water that make that difficult. And for example, something else as well, like grey water harvesting. We flush 30% of our potable water down the toilet every day, or use it to water the garden and so on. And more effective grey water harvesting systems potentially would make a big difference, but from a regulation point of view, they're difficult to do. So I think those are the sort of the key points I'd make around that. If we can incentivize the developers to move quicker, make it easier to innovate, I think we could be more effective.
Excellent, thanks. So as you say, regulatory driven market and a very famously regulated market, but a real shout out for innovation, shall we say, in spite of some of that. Hint at a green premium potentially in terms of cost, maybe incentives, maybe could we even be talking about subsidies, but really we need to try and have more dialogue about the value versus cost equation, and so as to avoid, if you like, ending up with what they sometimes refer acronym wise as CATNAP, cheapest available technology, narrowly avoiding prosecution, is not where we want to be going with this. So I'll remind the audience with one more round, and then we'll be getting to your questions. Please pop them in the ask a question box at the bottom. Good to see plenty of you joined, including, I'll give a shout out to Nick Meaton because he's out in New Zealand. He's from the heat maps thing, and so it's past midnight. So he's obviously got a big cup of cocoa there. So coming to you now, Sarah, in terms of the conflicts and challenges. If I were to say pitching water efficiency to consumers, if there's little bottom line benefit to offer a bill payer or a meter feeder in terms of water bills, we understand that's a hard sell. So equally, we understand that the energy saving angle in terms of cutting costs boosted by heat recovery sounds promising. And I know obviously you have an awful lot of programs and initiatives around that. However, if we're talking new build, my provocation is, does it not just come down to whether government makes key measures mandatory? Stick, not carrot. In which case, I could ask you, what role can you actually play as a water company in that debate? Yeah, so I think just to start off with as well, I think in terms of the challenge that we have is that I think there's still a disconnection between water and energy as an industry, and not just from from consumers understanding that connection as well in terms of their behavior. So I think to begin with, we understand that shower usage is contributes 30% to the overall daily household usage in a property. So from a behavior point of view, from our perspective, we're trying to encourage our customers to use less water in terms of shower use. But also there's the connection of actually how does that impact on their energy use. So I think currently to date, domestic hot water use contributes to about 4% greenhouse gases.
we're seeing that shower use has actually increased over the years. So we've gone from a culture of baths, thinking that baths use more water, to shower use. And actually, from the shower use perspective, it's one of the biggest contributors in terms of water demand. And so that's where the biggest savings are. So when it comes back to new builds and developments, I think there's the opportunity to start to really explain that connection as a household in terms of the link between water and energy. But I think from a developer's point of view, it's difficult to understand, well, where's the right measures or incentives they can make within a household. So Tim mentioned about Code for Sustainable Homes. I think, there was some lessons learned there, but ultimately customers or people living in those properties weren't using 80 litres. So it was designed to 80 litres per person per day. But actually how customers then use water in their homes, it wasn't reflecting on the standard. So in terms of the industry, we have the Water Efficiency Strategy Steering Group, and it's a UK strategy. So it's looking at England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. And one of the big drivers is that there's been lessons learned overseas in terms of having a mandatory water label. So where we've got the energy labeling in terms of, it's very well known and worldwide in terms of how products are labeled. But there's only in the UK, we only have a voluntary label, which isn't something, Joe Public would tell you what does that look like. So in terms of the benefits of a mandatory water label in the UK, if it was to be implemented, it would be one of the most cost-effective interventions. So it would reduce usage by 31 litres per person per day by over the next 25 years. So having the water label associated to a minimum standards fitting is part of Part G within the building regs, is where, as an industry, we would like that to be seen. So DEFRA have accepted that this is an efficient way in terms of driving demand management. But I think there's a huge piece around the labelling in terms of how it's then adopted, how it's made available to consumers, and this kind of cultural piece around understanding that, how much water is used by different appliances, different devices. So yes, I think when it comes down to kind of understanding that usage discrepancy, I think water and energy, it's still difficult for customers to understand how much they can save, how they can save it. So as part of our Anglian water strategy, we are now rolling out 1.1 million smart meters, water smart meters. Okay. So again, I think there's this opportunity of actually linking your water bill with your energy bill and understanding the two to drive that behaviour change.
Excellent, thank you. Some really good insights in there. So as you say, still we are battling that disconnect between water and energy, but there are the stats and the data is there. We do have it. But as you say, talk about demand, we need to explain the link. A question about what exactly is the motivation for developers, however, what is the pitch to them that, let's be blunt, they can sell on to buyers? If we're asking them to resell this concept, how are we pitching developers such that they convert it into a sales benefit for them to their prospective buyers and maybe a market differentiator? Good point about mandatory water label. And the big numbers are 31 litres per person per day, and again, also explaining the water consumption picture in terms of appliances and individual parts of your day and your activities and behaviours, so that people get a more granular understanding instead of just this vague kind of, we need to save water. So delighted to see plenty of questions coming in there, and Alex there, hand up already, would like to come back in there. Go on, Alex.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, some of the points Sarah was making there, and I think I just wonder whether before we move on, it would be worth expanding on that a little bit. I think particularly that water labelling scheme, because I think that is currently the Bathroom Manufacturers Association and the Unified Water Label, DEFRA, are sort of in that consulting around, the sort of the recommended way to approach that, whether it's something that's legislated or whether it's something that is adhered to more, I guess, universally across the industry from the various manufacturers. I think one of the key challenges around that is, that there's quite a lot of diversity in water systems in the UK, and therefore getting a label which communicates to the consumer in a way that they can easily understand around the water use of a product, which obviously will be significantly impacted by whether they've got a low pressure system, a high pressure system, what kind of high pressure system, etc., is a challenge. It's a challenge that absolutely needs to be overcome, and is something that the industry is working around. But I think like just putting a sort of basic mandatory labelling scheme like the electric scheme, I think is a little bit more complex for water use products. I think the other factor, and the key bit, we've mentioned it a couple of times really, I think is the behaviour piece as well is so important, and how much that has an influence. You know, I can't remember if it was University of Southampton did some research around this and demonstrated that actually sometimes if somebody showers under a lower flow, they shower for longer. So that doesn't necessarily help. If someone feels like they're getting a poor experience, you know, they're just more likely to spend longer in there. And that doesn't necessarily meet the objective. So I think it really is that key part about educating the consumer, but I think also being able for the consumer to see what they're doing. You know, we have a digital product in the market now, which tells you on a readout on the screen exactly how much water you've used after each shower, and you can see that in an app as well. And we know what an impact that has, that sort of gamification almost type process of communicating to the consumer, which can really make a big difference. So I think there's lots of different pieces to the puzzle that I think we have to approach.
Excellent, some nice points there, and also very interesting to hear about the idea of gamification and in a way how smart meters play into that. You know, this is giving people the metrics and the scores by which they can adjust their behavior and potentially adopt new behaviors even. So we're beginning to get a few questions queue up, which is good news. So only one last section from me, and it's the reasons to be cheerful bit, where I'm going to ask our panel to keep it fairly snappy and brief, because then we'll get to everybody else's questions promptly. So the last bit, we've looked at some of the difficulties, we've lifted up some stones and looked at some of the things underneath and why it's hard and why it's challenging. But this is where you pop on your rose-tinted spectacles for a minute, please, panel. We're going to look at successful, sustainable approaches to resource efficiency and wastewater heat recovery, how they can help house builders meet their obligations, homeowners cut their costs, shrink their footprints, and potentially the UK hit its net zero target. So first, Alex, nice and pithy from you. Competitive sector like private house building, how can sustainable innovation help you, Myra, frankly, build your brand and win market share in that sector?
Yeah, I think the key bit for us really is, you know, we've got to prove and get the developers and also the market, the consumer, to understand that sustainability doesn't have to come at the expense of experience. You know, moving into an eco home, or however, you know, you want to brand it, actually doesn't necessarily mean putting on your hair shirt, you know, wearing 17 jumpers and, you know, only washing once a week. You know, what we can do is through a combination of technology and also, you know, education really, and know that living in these sorts of homes can actually still be a great experience. You know, we're continuing to innovate around that. You know, obviously we've talked about wastewater heat recovery today, but also, you know, how can we produce a shower, for example, that works at low flow but still delivers you a really great experience in terms of it being immersive and cleaning you really effectively, etc. But I think the point I would really quickly make as well, just coming on to what Tim mentioned right at the beginning, is what we're also, you know, really excited about is, in some ways, new build is the easy place to do this. You know, the more difficult place is the existing housing stock, and that, you know, there's much more of it, and it's much more costly and complex to address. And again, that's, you know, a big part of our focus, is to look at, okay, wastewater heat recovery can give you great efficiency in a new build home where you can build it into the wall, but how can you apply that technology into, you know, a Victorian terrace house? So, you know, that's where we're really looking to develop and innovate in the future. And, you know, we believe the solutions are absolutely out there.
Excellent, great. And I think it's interesting. The industry is increasingly talking about the UX, the user experience, and it must, you know, to turn some of those aspirations into actions effectively. And if we want to go mass market, as we know, new build, not in 1% of the market, retrofit existing stock, we have to roll it out if we want to achieve anything like that kind of scale. So in the reasons to be cheerful, Sarah, So we're smiling and we're thinking happy thoughts here. So as the perceived value of hot water improves over time, how might sustainability become the driver behind innovation, installation, investment? How can sustainability be the driver for that market?
Yes, I think in terms of driving behaviour change, as I mentioned, that I think by focusing on one activity like shower use is a great benefit for us, because if you're trying to really start to educate consumers around the impact that they're having with their shower from an energy point of view, that they start to think about water usage, and that has a ripple effect into the rest of the household, and they start to use water more efficiently as well, their energy within the household. So I think it's targeting that one behavior, which then starts to look at the long-term sustainability, because I think with all of this as well, it's making sure that we are making changes now that has that sustainable impact for the future. So as I mentioned, that from a growth perspective, our demand management in the next 25 years, it won't be enough to provide enough water to everyone in our region and looking after the environment. So we do have to make some big step changes, and new builds will be part of that. But as Alex mentioned, that retrofitting for us will be one of the key drivers as well, especially from a water use perspective, because that's where we've got the biggest demand, is on our existing households. And also, I guess, thinking about from a commercial perspective too, in terms of hot water use and heat recovery at a commercial level. And I don't know whether that's something that's, where there's different processing that can help drive that innovation as well from a commercial perspective. Because, we've just been purely talking about domestic, but I think there's opportunities in the commercial. And I think just lastly as well, it's making sure that the technologies are affordable, and that it's a fair kind of, in terms of opportunities for customers in vulnerable circumstances or financial hardship, and making sure that we're not kind of just looking at an elite technology that's only suitable for those that can afford it. So.
Now, some nice points there, and like your last point as well about affordability, so that it just doesn't become the domain of the affluent only, and habits also, as you suggest, that stick. It's no good if people do this for a month and then the novelty wears off. The whole sustainability idea is it works over time, and maybe increasingly well. And as you point out, there's a very real spectre of water stress and scarcity. It's going to be more than just hosepipe bans further down the line. So, that is a real driver. There's risk driving this as well as opportunity. So then in this last section, then before the Q&A, so I'm coming now to you, Tim. I'm going to ask you a bit of future gazing to wind us up here. So fast forward maybe 5 or 10 years, you're looking ahead, crystal ball out. How might water feature in a resource smart new home of the future, 5 or 10 years on to?
Well, no surprises really. I think technology is going to be a key driver. I think personal technology is already developing at a fantastic rate, isn't it? My watch shouts at me all day. I think we're going to see information made available to users, which is going to be accessible and easily understood. I think that the smart home will have to include all of the different aspects, whether it be heat, whether it be water, whether it be the way in which we operate. I think the really good thing, Jim, and we're asking for good news, is that people like to do good things, don't they? We prefer to be the X-Men than Magneto. We want to do good things. And I think it's a way of helping people understand how they can do good things. And even the smallest gain is still a gain. I was fascinated to hear about the showering issue. My jolly nice water company sent me a little free egg timer, which I have in my shower, which means that I don't stay in there for a huge amount of time. And there you are. There's a completely free way of altering behaviour, saving hot water, stop wasting water. It's a fantastic thing, a little egg timer. So it doesn't have to be incredibly complicated stuff. It just has to be stuff that we can buy into and easily understand. And I really, 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 my passion is to help people understand. And often I think we opt for really, really complicated stuff that nobody's ever going to understand. Even the so-called experts have difficulty understanding. So whatever it is, it has to be simple to do, it has to be simple to understand, and it has to be simple to adopt and maintain.
Exactly. Nice point. Nice points for us to close my section on there. So it has to be easy and affordable. And I love the idea, your X-Men style call for smart and susty superheroes. Maybe the next Marvel blockbuster is going to be the Water Savers or something. Who knows? That it's a possibility. So now, thank you very much. So we're going to open it up to the floor now. We already have a few questions. If I remind the audience, you can type them in the Ask a Question button at the bottom. And we already have a few to kick us off. I've got a couple of general ones. I also have at least one coming in via Twitter. So first up, there's one maybe to bounce straight to you, Alex, in that Kate Wicken has a question of, hi, Alex, how does the cost to SAP performance compare to other renewables? And you might take as well, Paul Williams also asks, what temperature does the heat recovery achieve? So they're more tech and cost questions, Alex. So how does the cost compare SAP-wise to other renewables, and what temperatures does the heat recovery achieve, please?
Yeah, so when we talk about other renewables, there's lots of different things you can do to a new build house to try and achieve the energy requirements that are coming in from the Future Home Standard. So by putting solar photovoltaic panels on the roof, biomass boiler, triple glazing, all sorts of different kinds of technologies. And effectively, each of those you can give a sort of a cost per SAP point. So, for example, by putting PV panels on the roof, that will cost you typically about £200 per SAP point once you've factored for the cost of the actual material and then the installation. And in comparison, a wastewater heat recovery system like heat capture would be about £75 per SAP point. So it's quite a lot cheaper. But obviously, ultimately, in order to get to net zero, it is going to be a balance of them all. You're not going to be able to do one and not the other. And in various circumstances, it will be more efficient to combine different selections of sort of renewable products. But, wastewater heat recovery is something that can just sit in your property and always deliver, and regardless of how you actually heat your home in the first place. And in regards to the second question, which was how much it raises the temperature.
Yep.
So
what temperature does it? Yeah.
So to a certain degree, that will vary over the year because the incoming water temperature changes. So in the winter, obviously, it can be as low as 4 degrees. In the summer, it can get up to above 15 degrees. So typically, you're looking at about a sort of 10 to 15 degree temperature increase, but it can vary depending on different incoming circumstances. So I hope that helps. I mean, I think the way that we tend to measure a wastewater heat recovery system is how much of the heat that's sort of flowing down your drain do you recover. So the efficiency from the system and the heat capture is about 65% efficient. There are various other systems on the market that do vary with efficiency. Typically, they tend to be over 50%, but heat capture is 65%.
Excellent, thanks. And some nice questions already come in there. So, and I wonder if I could take, there's one here from Nick Meaton out in New Zealand. So he's asking, hi, can one of the panel please tell us what percentage of residential energy is used in hot water systems in the UK? So I wonder if I could ask both Sarah and Tim there, if not the percentage, if you could just talk to us a little about how much energy is getting consumed in your average household or in UK homes for hot water. So Sarah, I don't know, have you got some research and stats there and around?
Yes, the Energy Saving Trust actually did a study in 2014, and then they did a follow-up in 2018, and I can share the link as well to that report about domestic hot water use, and around 15% of customers' energy bills are from the contribution of hot water use in domestic properties.
Excellent. Thank you. Very, very nice. Great to have you on the panel. And Tim, also, I wonder if you could make a little comment about perhaps in general about the understanding of how much energy we're using around hot water, full stop, and that linkage that Sarah talked about earlier?
Yeah, I still think that there isn't a link, actually. I think people fail to make the link between hot water and energy. And it's sad but true. I think we see space heating as using energy. We can understand that. But it is about 15%, 15 to 20%, I would say, because it does depend on the heat source. It depends on the way you store the water, etc., etc. But I think what we do understand is that we've got to do something, and I think the fact of the matter is that I think the situation in terms of fuel costs is definitely going to drive people to help them understand the benefits of saving, because blimey, if the forecasts are as predicted come true, then we're certainly going to become very, very, very interested in how we can save energy.
Exactly. And I've got a couple of questions via LinkedIn and Twitter as well. Maybe if I give one to you first, Tim, a bit of a follow-up, really, because there's one, somebody's asked via Twitter about the challenge. Is it really about more innovation or just simply scale? So I guess they're asking, do we kind of have what we need already? We just need to get it to the mass market. So if cost is going to be that driver, Tim, do you see the industry geared up to deliver that kind of scale across the board with existing and new? Is it doable?
The easy answer is yes and yes, isn't it, really? Because I do think there's fantastic products available on the market, including Myra's very fine product. But also, you can't overlook innovation. I mean, innovation is driving all sorts of stuff. You referred to the car industry, Jim. Good grief, who could have forecast that? And people in our industry always say, oh, it's a traditional industry. It's really hard to drive change. Well, look at the car industry and the revolution that's hit there. I see the Tesla figures out this morning are absolutely dramatic. I mean, this is a total turnaround. And as ever these days, it's not only the scale of the change, it's pace of change, isn't it? Things happen now that took decades, suddenly happen in 3 weeks. And so the short answer is, yes, there are existing products out there. Yes, we do need to get those adopted across the board by lots and lots of people. But innovation is definitely going to play a role, and we all like a new thing, don't we?
Exactly. And Alex, you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in on that, and I think I would definitely agree with Tim. I think a lot of the technology fundamentals are to kind of help contribute, I think, are available. I think a lot of the innovation often comes around in how do you make that adoptable in a way that we've talked about. How do you make it really easy for the consumer to understand the benefit of and then to use? So, to go back to the electric car analogy, I think there were electric cars in the 1930s and 40s, but they weren't adopted. What kind of the likes of Tesla and so on have done have been able to bring it to the market in a way that people really want to do it. They want to do it not for just the sustainability reasons, but also for the fact that it's a fantastic product to have. And I think that's where a lot of that innovation comes in. Isn't necessarily totally reinventing the wheel for the sake of it with sort of needless complexity in tech. It's almost trying to take the things that are there but really make it efficient, streamlined and desirable.
Absolutely. And Sarah, I have a question also coming for you. I guess this is a broad question, but it is pertinent because we are talking about changing behaviours. They're asking via LinkedIn, how has COVID, lockdown and working from home changed the game for water use and efficiency? Because we are in a different cultural space now and an evolving one, aren't we, Sarah?
Yeah, so interestingly, so we started smart metering in July 2020, and we had a sample group of customers that have been trialing. So we had about 20,000 smart meters already that we'd fitted over the last few years. So interestingly, we could start to track how usage started to change in households. So we have seen a 10% increase in household usage. And obviously, again, we saw that reflect in the commercial non-household, where it completely, had disappeared. But overall, the actual distribution of water across the region had increased as well. So even the fact that we've just moved from being in offices to homes, so actually it's a big challenge that we set to Ofwat, our regulator, because as a industry, we're setting the targets around how do we become more efficient. And I think by 2050, the target's to get to 110 litres per person per day. But I think, with COVID and the kind of the longer term impacts, it's still really unknown in terms of how that will impact per capita consumption in the future. But it's, I think, trying to understand water usage is actually very difficult when you start looking at the number of people in a household, the kind of makeup in a household, and how that does start to tell us a more granular story of how water is used at home. So with the smart metering data, we will start to get more insight. But even things like toilet usage is where we see, so showers and toilets are the biggest water users at home. But I think coming back from Alex's point as well, I think in terms of looking at technology, in terms of a kind of a sustainable product, if we're looking at the kind of from an energy saving perspective, but would showers or water saving products of the future also reflect that? So, with the Myra showers, are they low water use that can still give consumers that user experience? But it's looking at water and energy together, because presumably the heat recovery is purely on the energy side, but actually how do you then drive the water savings as well?
Good point there. And I've got a couple of questions to finish with you for Alex, but if I just come to you, Tim, first, in terms of if we're talking about this smarter, more sustainable, more resource efficient home going forward, and there's a whole portfolio, a whole suite of technologies potentially and materials involved, who should be driving this agenda? Is it consultants? Is it designers? Is it engineers? Is it the builders, the contractors? If you had to, aside from government putting in regulation, if you had to pick parts of the industry that need to be leading on this, who would you task with that job, Tim?
I'll come back to my passion about installers. I think installers are the people who do it. These are the guys who are going to deliver it on the ground, whether it be a new build or whether it be in existing properties, whether they be subcontractors, etc. These are the people who are going to be delivering it. So they have to be, to me, the fulcrum around which the communications depend. And they have to have access to the information and the products through the supply chain. And I believe that they can carry out an absolutely crucial role in doing this. And they have to be convinced, along with the rest of us, by the way, that these products are going to be efficient. The last thing an installer wants is to be called back to something because a consumer is disappointed. So I think that they will play an absolutely crucial role, and to help all of us understand whether we be individuals or whether we be commercial operations.
Excellent. It's good point. Good call for installers as conduit there. The communicators, they need to be equipped, skilled, resourced, helped to do that job as effectively as possible. So we're now to the last couple of minutes. So I'm coming back to you, Alex. We've got a couple of questions and maybe some final words. And I should point out the panel have done a great job of posting a bunch of links in the chat as well, so you can follow up on some of the things mentioned and check them out. And they should all be in the on-demand version as well, so you can view them after we close now in a few minutes and go back and look them up online. So Alex, coming to you with the last couple of questions. The first one from Ben Cheetham is a straightforward one. Do Myra have a wastewater heat recovery tray option for apartments? It's one question. And then more broadly, I'd like you to just wrap up with from Johnny. Hi Alex, what makes the Myra heat capture unique? So do you have a wastewater heat recovery tray option for apartments, and what makes it unique? So a couple of closing thoughts for you there, please, Alex.
So the answer to the first one is Unfortunately, not at the moment. But I think, as I mentioned in one of the earlier answers, I think absolutely addressing that retrofit capability for wastewater heat recovery systems is something we are actively working on, and we hope to have some good news in that space relatively soon. I think the answer to the second one is sort of two things really. I think the first one is you can recover the heat in a wastewater heat recovery system relatively simply just by running the water around the outside. But what we've done with our system is put in a sort of unique rib design, which really slows the water down and therefore ensures you can recover more heat or as much heat as you possibly can, getting as high heat transfer as possible, which is why it's up to 65%. I think the other factor is that ours is made of stainless steel. And what that means is it's recyclable. A lot of other systems are made out of different materials, which means they can't be easily recycled. And that's, we talked about water saving and heat recovery, but I think when you're talking about sustainability more broadly, you've got to be trying to make those positive choices in every part of the product design. And things like recyclability and packaging and so on are really important factors as well.
Excellent. Nice point to finish on there. The energy water waste nexus, if you like, the circular economy, which is the elephant in the room, I think, for many sectors, not least construction. So that is it. Thank you very much. We're just about bang on time there. So big thank you to our panelists, Sarah, Tim, and of course, Alex, and our sponsors at Myer Showers. Reminder to our virtual audience out there, thank you for watching on Crowdcast. Your comments and questions, you can immediately after we've finished, go back, watch the start. If you missed the first 10 minutes, send it to friends, family, loved ones, everybody in your LinkedIn community, whatever. It's available straight away after, free for others to view. Check out elementalexpo.com. As I said at the top of the show, the online community for professionals focused on innovation, heat, water, air, and energy, the vital elements within the built environment now and in the future. So back catalogue events on the website, everything on demand. Thank you again to our panel for an excellent session. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of water, if you like, there today. So that's it for today. I've been Jim McClelland, editor at SustMeme. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.